biggest oil rig on the planet, the Aker H6E.
This is a very big structure.
Built by Norwegian engineers.
We're trying now to keep the schedule.
For extreme conditions. Even the construction is extreme. 2,000 trailer wheels. An 11,000-ton lift.
If you flood this, you are in trouble.
The mating of two monsters.
So one soccer field hitting another.
If the bad weather doesn't get to this team,
we have to get this moving. Is there somebody working on this place?
the constant stress will.
So there's no reason to believe that this won't hold.
Norway, famous for its fjords, fishing, and loads of natural beauty. But the little island of Stord on the southwest coast has a different claim to fame. The largest oil rigs on the planet. The Aker H6E, 33,000 tons of steel. 33 stories high. The king of all oil rigs. Built for the extreme conditions of the Barents Sea in the Arctic Ocean. The sea is too deep for the H6E to be anchored to the bottom. It floats instead, with its pontoons 23 meters underwater. 8 powerful thrusters keep the rig exactly where it needs to be all the time. The Aker shipyard has a contract to build 2 of these giant oil rigs and get them drilling for crude as soon as possible. It's taken more than 2 years to get this far on the first rig, and it's still not finished. That's where this guy comes in. Knut Engebretsen, Marine Operations Manager. In charge of the mega moving maneuvers for the second rig. His challenge is to complete the operations as quickly and efficiently as possible. Work on rig number 2 has begun far away from Norway. In Dubai, home of extreme construction. A fitting place for the largest oil rig hull ever constructed. Plus, it was cheaper to build it here. 16,000 tons of steel was shipped to Dubai from 3 different countries. Over the past 14 months, the crews at Dubai dry docks have put it all together into larger and larger and larger pieces, until finally they've completed 2 mega hull half sections. 8,000 tons each.
That's the gripper race. That's the one for the pushing units.
Knut has to join the 2 sections together. But before he can do that, he has a monster juggling act to accomplish. Right now, the hull sections are in 2 different locations. The yard and the launch area. The whole basin of the launch area must be filled with water. The launch hull floated over to the deeper side and out. Then the water is drained, and the other hull section is skidded across the yard into the launch area. dry dock crews is prepping the skid hull for the big move across the yard. A system of 36 hydraulic jacks will push the 8,000-ton hull section along steel rails. The jacks have Teflon pads on the bottom, but they depend on a layer of nitrogen beneath them that should float the hull across the yard, like a hovercraft.
And this is the seal we have. After you apply a pressure of nitrogen, this will pop out, and this will be the sliding surface. If these are not popping out, we will slide on pads, which are here. And the reason for using nitrogen is simply to avoid ignition that can happen if you ignite, let's say, the grease or something like that.
Friction is the main enemy of this sensitive system. Knut discovered that the hard way with the hull section that's now over in the launch area. His team got stuck moving it across the yard. The delays cost them a full week.
The problem was there were too many parallel activities going on. There were sandblasting and things that put dirt on the rails.
The finicky jack system wasn't Knut's choice. Dubai Dry Docks chose the system and supervises all the workers. Knut can only hope they understand how important their prep work is. Rule number 1. Cleanliness is godliness, and exact alignment is crucial.
Then have you also checked the leveling of the this okay? What kind of tolerance are we talking about? 1 millimeter.
Every detail counts for these mega operations, especially when this guy's around. Peter Vallis, warranty surveyor for the company that insures the whole project.
A piece of wood which can float up and make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to go. Procedures are being followed, things are safe.
A master mariner, Peter has worked on some big projects, but nothing like this.
This is right up there at the top. They were actually flying on just having...
Peter will be looking over Knut's shoulder from start to finish this week.
That's fine.
Next on their agenda, off to the launch area to inspect the other red monster. The launch operation begins tomorrow. This is the last chance for Knut and Peter to check inside the great pontoons. They're divided into 61 compartments. Some are ballast tanks. They'll be filled with water to keep the hull perfectly balanced at all times. But other compartments must be sealed tight as a drum.
This is where the water level is coming, so we need to have it tight. Otherwise, if you flood this, you are in trouble. You will lose all the heavy equipment. And extremely expensive equipment, the thrusters, the pump. There are some things to be completed. We checked the seawater inlet valves, and they are okay. So basically putting on the manhole covers from the inside, and they're okay.
So what's 2 and 3 supposed to be? 2 and 3 are on bollards, 2 bollards there. They have a capsule there.
Tomorrow, Knut will hand over the launch operation to Captain Tony Crabb.
So, Captain Tony, who will run the show tomorrow from your side, from the marine department?
We will run it together as a team. Sajid and I. There's rather a big area to cover, so Sajid will be on one side, I'll be on the other side. We'll be in contact,
okay.
So we'll do it as a team.
What kind of manning are you planning?
We need about 18 people around the wing wall.
Yeah.
And now, a bit of bad news about a nasty wind called a shamal.
You can maybe start feeling the effects of it already.
Yes.
We do seem to have a shamal coming.
The sandstorms whipped up by a shamal can strip paint off cars.
This one is apparently supposed to be a strong shamal, so it's really the last thing we want. It would be difficult to control that.
The fate of the launch schedule this week will depend on the weather. one more thing that Canute has no power to control. At the dry docks in Dubai, a crew of 1,000 workers is preparing the two pieces of the world's largest oil rig hull for some major moves. This morning, the crew is installing the 36 jacks that will push the giant skid hull across the yard. Over at the launch area, workers are speeding up the prep to launch the other hull section into the water for the first time. Everyone's trying to beat the weather, especially Operations Chief Knut Engebretsen. Strong winds are coming, powerful enough to swing the hull out of control.
So what we try to do now is to accelerate the preparation so that we can utilize the weather window, which seems to be tomorrow.
Weather isn't his only concern. The dry docks team has parked another client's barge in his launch area while they work on it. A space that's already tight for the moves he has to make with his hull.
The problem was this foreign object here, this barge, which is not part of our project, interfering with the loadout operation.
At the outer edge of the launch area, a crane team is placing the last panel of a temporary wall. It's supposed to hold back the water that will flood the launch area tomorrow. Only 15 meters away from the wall, workers continue to prepare track for the skid hull. They smooth on a layer of special sand to level the bumpy concrete surface. Next comes sheets of plywood. They're topped off with a section of steel rail. The joints are tightened as much as possible, and the level is carefully checked. It would be a disaster for the big skid if these tracks got wet.
Basically, you have all the plywood that will come off, and you need to relay the rails and that kind of stuff. We lose control over what is underneath the rails.
That's why these guys are shoring up the temporary wall of the launch area and trying to seal up its joints. 127 million liters of water will flood into here tomorrow. The next morning. So far, the weather is calm. No Shamal in sight. Yet.
This is just for the maneuvering here.
And the dry docks crew has come up with a way of dealing with the extra barge in Canute's launch area. They'll hook up the barge to the hull and float them up together.
They handle as one big package. Therefore, we don't have the rope sweeping over that barge with all the obstructions as you see. This is a small extra load to carry, so to speak. So this will work.
But a new disaster is brewing. As planned, water is teeming into the launch area. The problem is, it's flowing right through to the other side of the temporary wall, creeping toward all the freshly laid, dry track. Canute isn't happy, but he's not surprised either.
I had some doubt about the ceilings. They just need to tighten up the seals there, so it should be okay, but it was unnecessary.
Fortunately, the workers managed to keep the water from reaching the tracks. Finally, the water is high enough for the operation to begin. First, a barge is floated underneath the cross braces of the 8,000-ton monster to support it as it's moved over to the deeper basin.
At the same time, we'll do some ballasting, so all the points will float at the same time. That's important, so we keep control. So far, so good. So we'll cross our fingers and hope it will continue like that.
When the barge floats up high enough, welders attach it to the hull. The final step before the launch.
How much time to change the rope there?
Knut wants to make sure the other client's barge doesn't collide with his precious rig.
Is there somebody working on this spacing?
Now it's a waiting game while the water lifts the hull off the bottom of the shallow basin. By the time the sun sets on a long day of work at Dubai dry docks, the launch hull is ready to be floated out into the deep basin. She glides across the water on her maiden voyage. But the big skid will not be nearly so smooth a ride. The next day, final preparations for the big skid are in full swing.
So you just have to go for the ray crossings and the plate underneath.
George Vessel and Uwe Kruken from Germany designed the hydraulic jack system
All the seats up.
that will push the hull.
So now it's floating on the air cushion. We're counting the number of seals not being opened. Basically, we are getting ready to push.
The first rig slipped backwards on the tracks during the skid last year. So Knut insisted on adding extra clamps for rig number 2 as backup.
You have some new brake pads for us?
Yes, but no 6 bottles of red Italian war.
Last year we had a bet. I had a fear it would slip, but Georg said it will not slip. So okay, case of wine. So I'll get a case of wine from him. But this time he won't bet.
George is confident the skid will go better this time.
Because I see everything is in the best condition we can have, so I have no doubts that we will move.
A final call to the operators. And the big skid begins. The great hull moves. 20 centimeters. Then, everyone's worst nightmare. It's stuck. Knut's verdict is swift. Not enough lubrication on the tracks.
No grease. No grease.
Yeah, in half an hour it's already fine day of grit on it.
Peter agrees.
We didn't have enough lubrication. Also, with the wind picking up, there's a lot of grit that's being transferred onto the grease. That may become an issue.
The chamal they managed to avoid for the launch has arrived, full force. And there's some sandblasting on the other hull that can't possibly be helping. Some guys start adding more grease under the jacks. Everyone pitches in to get the skid back on track.
Okay, let's start. Let's see.
But there will be no quick fix here. Knut has discovered that some of the jacks aren't level enough.
As we see on this side, it's actually touching, and we can see a steel-to-steel scrape line here. And this is extreme friction, which we cannot handle with the kind of system we have.
This is a huge setback for the team.
We're all despoiled, yes.
All the jacks must now be removed, cleaned, and reassembled. This will put Knut behind schedule. A full 2.5 days. Next morning in Dubai, the winds are down. And Knut's spirits are up. A little bit.
Okay, Tony, coming now, coming. Shinaga off the plating, please.
The hull section that launched yesterday must be moved out of the launch area to make way for its mate. A slot has just opened up out at the big dock. The calm weather means they can take advantage of it.
Number 4, slack now.
The Marine team goes into action, moving the floating giant to its new moorings.
This is a little milestone. Yes.
But this morning's success
It's not popping higher.
is overshadowed by the failure of the big skid.
We have this unit now, which we are somewhat concerned about. We had to get this moving by late tomorrow, hopefully before.
That turns out to be wishful thinking. It takes almost 4 days to get ready for the second attempt. There's no lack of lubrication this go-round. Not a grain of sand on the tracks. And this time, with a little extra power and some smooth pieces of sheet metal under the jacks. The whole system works.
We had a couple of long nights. We've had a little trouble getting it moving. The engineers have now come up with a plan to get it onto steel plates. That's been a miracle cure.
The big skid will be finished 24 hours from now. Then the skid hull will be launched into the harbor and joined with its mate.
We make it onto the dock and join it with the second half, and then we'll sail to Norway through the Suez Canal.
The monster 16,000-ton hull will set sail in 5 weeks. A 53-day trip, more than 12,000 kilometers, all the way up to Norway. Now, it's 3 months later, on the island of Stord in Norway. The great hull has arrived. And the deck that will be mounted on top of it sticks halfway out of the factory hull. Once again, Knut is up against a tight deadline. He has several massive operations to complete in the next 12 days. First, the deck of the oil rig must be moved onto a giant barge. Then it will be lifted 30 meters up in the air. Next, the hull will be floated underneath the deck. And finally, the monster parts will be mated. The deck of the Aker H6E weighs more than 11,000 tons. Getting it up 30 meters will be one of the most extreme heavy lift operations ever attempted. Knut is putting a lot of faith in this guy. Gudmund Olsen, extreme lift specialist. He designed the system that will hoist the monster deck. First, Gudmund and his team have to install 32 giant trailers under the deck and transport the deck onto this barge. But heavy rain is causing problems. It's filling up the inside of the deck. Several hundred tons will have to be pumped out before the rollout.
If you have a lot of water in this will be very unstable because it's shifting. So we're keeping up with the rain as good as we can.
Water can be the enemy of this operation, but it's also essential elsewhere, as ballast. Inside the giant barge are 20 separate tanks. The bow tanks have been pre-ballasted with 10,000 tons of water. As the deck and trailers move onto the barge, 3,000 tons of that water is redistributed to the stern of the barge. This keeps the whole load balanced. Goodman's crew installs the last of the trailers under the deck. Next morning, the deck is ready to roll.
Og du er klar. Jeg skal sjekke ballasten fra på hjørnet først.
Just 4 guys operate all the trailers, moving them out by remote control. 2,000 wheels, 5.5 tons riding on each wheel. And a lot riding on this guy, Trond Nyseter, ballast engineer. His job is to make sure this monster load doesn't capsize. It's tricky. All the trailers are carrying different weights.
So you'll have more load on one side of the barge. So it will have a tendency to lean to one side. Then you have to stop some pumps once in a while to keep it floating horizontally.
Trond and his team are constantly measuring the height of the barge from the water on both sides.
Just 1 centimeter difference, so it's perfect.
And monitoring the bilge pumps.
Basically, we are pumping out the same amount of load in water as we are driving on board. Så vi är på väg ner, vi kommer så vitt ner. Ja.
It takes hours for the mega caravan to move onto the barge. But at last, they're almost at the finish line. A very precise target. One moment to enjoy the praise, and Goodman has to get back to work. He's feeling the pressure. The big lift is only 4 days from now. He and his team have a lot to do. At the Aker shipyard on the island of Stord, a team prepares for one of the heaviest lifts ever attempted.
Morten I posisjon nå.
The yard crews have plenty of prep work to do. Job 1. Install temporary lifting towers on 2 sides of the deck. 4 are already up. Here comes the 5th. But there are still 3 to go. The towers must be welded securely to their bases. Each one has to support 1,400 tons of weight. But the almost constant rain is causing problems.
These guys have been doing what we call almost like submerged welding. Now I'm checking the welds and the welding inspection will be done later. We have to keep pressure on.
While each tower is being installed, Goodman's team works on job 2, assembling the jacking systems that will be mounted on top of them. 32 strands of cable hang down from each hydraulic jack. The anchor ends will be slotted into lifting attachments on the sides of the deck.
Good. Go.
Across the yard, there's a whole lot of other work going on. Preparing the hull before it's joined to the deck. The man in charge, Inga Bertine Almeland, hull designer. It's his job to make sure the column tops of the great hull are perfectly aligned with their attachment points on the underside of the deck.
Klarene, se hvordan dette er. Se på kuttlinjene. Och så går han lite, han stoppar här och så går han lite ner.
Håll on där, och så släpper du fint av.
The column tops are adjusted in 2 steps, ballasting and leveling. There is always water in the ballast tanks of the pontoons. Shift some of that water to the end of one pontoon, and the pontoon will bend, forcing the nearest column top to tilt in that direction. Then steel plates, or shims, must be added to level out the column top.
You see on the column top we have some shim plates, some boxes. Those are calculated very exactly where to fit and how to guide the deck into the best position for this deck hull connection.
Inga Bertin can save the project up to 10,000 man-hours of work after the mating. In the fabricating, fitting, and welding of the steel it will take to join the 2 parts tightly together.
And even if this is a very big structure, we need to be within few millimeters.
Designing this great hull was more than a job to Inga Bertin. It was a labor of love.
I've been involved in this for the first day and a lot of years now. It is my baby. I'm dreaming about it every day, every night.
Back down on the ground. Goodman Olsen's crew is ready to install one of the jack assemblies.
Då har vi tracken som kommer ut. Och det längre bakover.
The crew heads up right after it to make the final adjustments and bolt it down.
Ja, det regnar också.
It's been windy the past few days.
Svänger lite högre.
Håll on där och så svänger du fint högre.
Dra på lägena.
Maneuvering 60 tons into position by hand is never easy. Throw in a bit of a breeze, it's almost impossible.
Och så kommer trappen nå.
Plus, just as they're about to bolt it into place, the rain starts up again.
Down. Down. Det är platt. Plattar och drar på självklart lite längre.
They still have 3 jack assemblies to mount. If only the weather would give them a break. The big boss sure won't give them a break. At this morning's meeting about the deck lift schedule.
Okej, så vi får tillgång på onsdag, var det? Och kunna ha apparater. Onsdag.
It's Goodman in the hot seat.
Ja, färdig med 2 första tårna. Jag förstår att det är färdig ramma barnet på nu som är färdig i löpet av en par 3 timmar, tänker jag.
Bottom line, the deck lift is on hold until the rest of the towers are in place and the jacks are mounted on top of them.
We need to minimize the time waiting for each other and optimize all the work. With respect to lifting towers, there's a lot of work going on installing them, and one of the things that is probably driving the schedule.
What Knut means is, it's all up to Goodman.
Thank you, Knut. No, but we're trying now to keep the schedule, but it's a very tight schedule. There's a lot of activities, so we have to push hard to reach the deadline.
It's the day of the lift. Goodman has managed to finish all his prep on deadline. Now his crew is doing the final tightening of the cables.
Everything is good. The jacks are in position, so we're just waiting to have the latest weather forecast.
Hold in your stomachs!
Goodman's guys take a few moments out to grab a group photo. After all, the lift they're about to attempt is the biggest job they've ever done.
much bigger than the previous jobs we've done. So it's a record for the company. It's a record for me also.
At 4 p.m., like clockwork, the lift is about to begin. This is Control Central. The whole operation is run from here by computer. With the first stroke of the hydraulic jacks, the massive lift begins.
Har du tension over det? Vi har
en 1700 pund på hele siden og cirka på den siden.
Okay.
This is final exam time for Goodman. He designed the lifting system, did all the prep thoroughly. But now, the big question: will his jacks be able to take the full load of the deck? On the island of Stord, the risky lift of the 11,000-ton oil rig deck is underway. Everything hangs on the strength of 32 hydraulic jacks. Each jack is pulling up 350 tons. Every 18-millimeter cable is straining to raise 11 tons.
Er så noenlunde fornøyd, eller?
Ja, bra. 6000 cirka i tonnen.
Cirka halve lasten, ja.
Litt for mye variabler.
We're starting to transfer all the load from the barge to the jacks. 10,000? 10,005?
10,500 tons on the jacks. And finally, the jacks are fully loaded.
Full load on the wires. That's correct. 11,200 tons, approximately, in the jacking system. So nothing has failed so far. So there's no reason to believe that this won't hold all the way up.
Another few centimeters, and daylight shows between deck and barge. They'll lift 4 meters and park it for the night.
Når du sier at når det er låst, så sier du fra.
Yes, I understand that, but they first are going to do some measurements now. And we are going to take some checks on the towers.
Goodman's system has passed the test.
Nothing happened. Well, went as planned, so yes.
The pressure may have eased for Goodman, but it's just gone way up for someone else. Inga Bertine is finding that every time he solves an alignment problem on one part of the hull, the fix throws another part out of whack. He has a strict deadline to come up with a solution.
Tonight. We have to cut back all these things tonight to get it as good as possible.
It's now day 8 of the complex operation to mate the deck with the hull. Only 4 days to go. The deck, still at the 4-meter mark, will be lifted up to the full 30 meters this morning. The hull team has been working non-stop to fix the tops of the columns, based on Inga Bertine's new calculations. Out at the docking area, the deck rises higher and higher. Now it's time to move the big orange barge out of the way. If all goes well, tomorrow it will be replaced by the hull. The lift up to 30 meters takes the rest of the day and into the rainy evening. With 5 meters to go, Goodman and his exhausted team are the only ones left on the site. A testament to Knut's faith in him.
So, awfully close. Yeah, it's going very well. And, we are happy. All the boys and whole crew is happy now. So we have no incidents, no injuries. All equipment is working according to plan. So, and the schedule also. So I'm happy with it.
Next morning, the deck is completely lifted, a full 10 stories above the water. The hull is swarming with crews preparing for the big float-out. 4 74-ton ocean tugs will push the hull in to meet its mate. Multiple lines are secured. And the float-out is underway. No sign of dedicated designer Ingebertine Almeland. He was up all night working. Oh, here he comes now.
I've been running to catch it. Yes, we had some inspection up during the morning, very early in the morning. Some pieces we may have to finalize in the dock. Yes, on schedule.
The hull meets the deck for the very first time. A surveyor checks to make sure it's coming in dead straight on.
The hope is that we don't have to reposition the hull as we go down. So therefore, we try to stay within the 20 millimeters. So one soccer field hitting another similar size unit within 20 plus minus 20 millimeters or less.
No, this towing line.
It's all on Ingebertine's head now. Nobody will know until the hull is completely under the deck whether his calculations were correct. If they're far off, it will be a very costly, time-consuming fix for the whole project. There isn't much work going on at Akerstorp right now. Everyone stopped to watch the big show. The hull of the great oil rig will soon be mated with its deck. Knut is anxious to find out whether Ingebertine's fixes on the hull have brought it into line with the underside of the deck.
The ultimate target is to have a 3 millimeter gap for welding all the way through so we can just sew it up.
At last, the hull moves into its final position. The marine crew calls a halt. The instant the hull comes to a stop, Ingebertine is on it, climbing up to check the positioning of the columns and cross braces. The reports he sends back are good. They can now begin to lower the deck.
Is the finale. All the operations have gone very well thanks to the great preparation both on the engineering side, on the yard, and on the subcontractor side. Without that, it could have been a disaster. Everybody has done a great job, so I'm very pleased at this point.
For Goodman's team, it's time to pack up and get ready to go. Their last job on this project will be to lower the deck onto the hull. an operation that will run through tonight into tomorrow. It takes the whole team a full day and a half to complete the delicate operation of joining the two giants together. In the end, it's a seamless masterpiece. Saturday evening at the local pub. The whole team is exhausted, but spirits are high.
It sounds like a strange thing that we're happy after working, let's say, 20 hours per day, but it's like a relief, and we're happy. Even if this might sound a little bit perverted to be happy about working for 20 hours.
Knut should be happy. He and Ingeborg team managed to save 11,000 man-hours of valuable construction time mating the deck and hull.
I'm very satisfied with what we have done now. And looking at it, gives me some tears in my eyes.
When the big rig is completely finished, Acker will rent it out for a cool $600,000 a day. It will be floated up to the Barents Sea and put to work for the next 20 years.